And this was no disciplined march. It was a stampede gigantic and terrible, without order and without a goal. 6 million people, unarmed and unprovisioned, driving headlong. It was the beginning of the rout of civilization, of the massacre of mankind. Welcome to Sunday Stories. This is something new that I'm trying. Everything's going to be nice and peaceful and quiet. Hello, Mute Gaming. How are you? Space Bunny, welcome. There is no question of the day today. There are no sound effects. There are no channel point redemptions. It's literally getting down to brass tacks. It's going to be me sitting here reading The War of the Worlds to you. And the lighting's a bit off. I've tried lighting some candles. I've got 2 scented candles in front of me here to try and get that fireside feel, you know. You can see the chroma key is getting off a little bit. Good, how about you? I'm very well, Mute Gaming, thank you. I'm eager to do this. I just hope my reading voice is up to scratch. We have The War of the Worlds by h.g.wells, so You may know this through the Tom Cruise film from some time ago. You might know it from the BBC adaptation. You might know it from the current adaptation. It's basically what if alien invasion, but in the 1800s, late 19th century. It's one of the early examples of sci-fi, and it's a wonderful story. I love it, so that's why I've chosen it for this little experiment here. See, Mute Gaming, that's perfect. You've got yourself a hot chocolate, nice and warm. I want everyone to be cozy. I'm cozy. I had the coziest lunch just now. I had lots of finger food like celery, carrots, spring onion, crackers, cheese, a little bit of salami, and then some hummus. I was watching some bushcraft videos. It was very lovely. So how it's going to work is I'm going to read an entire chapter. It's not very big. You can see chapter 1 only goes from pages 3 to 8. So this is a perfect time to practice. And then once I've done a chapter, I'll catch up with chat. So Space Bunny is warm, sitting in front of a PC, photoshopping a nipple. Space, for goodness sake. Still excited for story time. Oh, that's good. That's good. So yeah, there's no music. I'm just going to be sitting here reading. So the Stoned Philosopher Leo. Thank you for the follow. Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm gonna do my best to. It sounds bad. I'm gonna do my best to ignore chat, just to stick with the story, and I'll come back to chat once I've finished a chapter. Okay, so don't think I'm ignoring you. I do have a timer that should say that, but we'll see if it comes up. I love everything about the background. I can smell the picture. Thank you, Carrot. Hope you're well, friend. So yeah, nothing for it. Here we go. I'm gonna hide the chat. Book 1, The Coming of the Martians. Chapter 1, The Eve of the War. No one would have believed, in the last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched keenly and closely by intelligences greater than man's and yet as mortal as his own. That as men busied themselves about their affairs, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacency, men went to and fro over this globe about their little affairs, serene in their assurance of their empire over matter. It is possible that the infusoria under the microscope do the same. No one gave a thought to the older worlds of space as sources of human danger, or thought of them only to dismiss the idea of life upon them as impossible and improbable. It is curious to recall some of the mental habits of those departed days. At most, terrestrial men fancied there might be other men upon Mars, perhaps inferior to themselves, and ready to welcome a missionary enterprise. Yet, across the gulf of space, minds that are to our minds as ours are to those of beasts that perish, intellects vast and cool and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes, and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. And early in the 20th century came the great disillusionment. The planet Mars, I scarcely need remind the reader, revolves about the Sun at a mean distance of 140 million miles, and the light and heat it receives from the Sun is barely half of that received by this world. It must be, if the nebular hypothesis has any truth, older than our world, and long before this Earth ceased to be molten, life upon its surface must have begun its course. The fact that it is scarcely 1/7 of the volume of the Earth must have accelerated its cooling to the temperature at which life could begin. It has air and water and all that is necessary for the support of animated existence. Yet so vain is man, and so blinded by his vanity, that no writer, up to the very end of the 19th century, expressed any idea that intelligent life might have developed there, far or indeed at all, beyond its earthly level. Nor was it generally understood that since Mars is older than our Earth, with scarcely a quarter of the superficial area, and remoter from the Sun, it necessarily follows that it is not only more distant from life's beginning, but nearer its end. The secular cooling that must someday overtake our planet has already gone far indeed with our neighbour. Its physical condition is still largely a mystery, but we know now that even in its equatorial region, the midday temperature barely approaches that of our coldest winter. Its air is much more attenuated than ours, its oceans have shrunk until they cover but a third of its surface, and as its slow seasons change, huge snowcaps gather and melt about either pole, and periodically inundate its temperate zones. That last stage of exhaustion, which to us is still incredibly remote, has become a present-day problem for the inhabitants of Mars. The immediate pressure of necessity had brightened their intellects, enlarged their powers, and hardened their hearts. And looking across space, with instruments and intelligences such as we have scarcely dreamt of, they see, at its nearest distance, only 35 million of miles sunward of them. A morning star of hope, our own warmer planet, green with vegetation and grey with water, with a cloudy atmosphere eloquent of fertility, with glimpses through its drifting cloud wisps of broad stretches of populous country and narrow, navy-crowded seas. And we men, the creatures who inhabit this earth, must to be them at least as alien and lowly as are the monkeys and lemurs to us. The intellectual side of man already admits that life is an incessant struggle for existence, and it would seem that this too is the belief of the minds upon Mars. Their world is far gone in its cooling, and this world is still crowded with life, but crowded only with what they regard as inferior animals. To carry warfare sunward is indeed their only escape from the destruction that generation after generation creeps upon them. And before we judge of them too harshly, we must remember what ruthless and utter destruction our own species has wrought, not only upon animals, such as the vanished bison and dodo, but upon its own inferior races. The Tasmanians, in spite of their human likeness, were entirely swept out of existence in a war of extermination waged by European immigrants in the space of 50 years. Are we such apostles of mercy as to complain if the Martians warred in the same spirit? The Martians seem to have calculated their descent with amazing subtlety. Their mathematical learning is evidently far in excess of ours, and to have carried out their preparations with a well-nigh perfect unanimity. Had our instruments permitted it, we might have seen the gathering trouble far back in the 19th century. Men like Schiaparelli watched the red planet. It is odd, by the by, that for countless centuries Mars has been the star of war, but failed to interpret the fluctuating appearances of the markings they mapped so well. All that time the Martians must have been getting ready. During the opposition of 1894, a great light was seen on the illuminated part of the disk, first at the Lick Observatory, then by Perrotin of Nice, and then by other observers. English readers heard of it first in the issue of Nature, dated 2nd August. I am inclined to think that the appearance may have been the casting of a huge gun, the vast pit sunk into their planet, from which their shots were fired at us. Peculiar markings, as yet unexplained, were seen near the site of that outbreak, during the next two oppositions. The storm burst upon us 6 years ago now, as Mars approached opposition. Lavelle of Java set the wires of the astronomical exchange palpitating with the amazing intelligence of a huge outbreak of incandescent gas upon the planet. It had occurred towards midnight of the 12th, and the spectroscope, to which he had once resorted, indicated a mass of flaming gas, chiefly hydrogen, moving with an enormous velocity towards this Earth. This jet of fire had become invisible about 12:15. He compared it to a colossal puff of flame, suddenly and violently squirted out of the planet, as flaming gas rushes out of a gun. A singularly appropriate phrase it proved. Yet the next day there was nothing of this in the papers, except a little note in the Daily Telegraph, and the world went in ignorance of one of the gravest dangers that ever threatened the human race. I might not have heard of the eruption at all had I not met Ogilvy, the well-known astronomer, at Ottershaw. He was immensely excited at the news, and in the excess of his feelings invited me up to take a turn with him that night in a scrutiny of the red planet. In spite of all that has happened since, I still remember that vigil very distinctly. The black and silent observatory, the shadowed lantern throwing a feeble glow upon the floor in the corner, the steady ticking of the clockwork of the telescope, the little slit in the roof, an oblong profundity with the stardust streaked across it. Ogilvy moved about, invisible but audible. Looking through the telescope, one saw a circle of deep blue, and the little round planet swimming in the field. It seemed such a little thing, so bright and small and still, faintly marked with transverse stripes, and slightly flattened from the perfect round. But so little it was, so silvery warm, a pin's head of light. It was as if it quivered a little, but really, this was the telescope vibrating with the activity of the clockwork that kept the planet in view. As I watched, the little star seemed to grow larger and smaller, and to advance and recede, but that was simply that my eye was tired. 40 millions of miles it was from us, more than 40 million miles of void. Few people realize the immensity of vacancy in which the dust of the material universe swims. Near it in the field, I remember, were 3 little points of light, 3 telescopic stars, infinitely remote, and all around it was the unfathomable darkness of empty space. You know how that blackness looks on a frosty starlit night. In a telescope it seems far profounder, and invisible to me, because it was so remote and small, flying swiftly and steadily towards me across that incredible distance, drawing nearer every minute by so many thousands of miles, came the thing they were sending us, the thing that was to bring so much struggle and calamity and death to the earth. I never dreamt of it then as I watched. No one on earth dreamt of that unerring missile. That night, too, there was another jetting out of gas from the distant planet. I saw it. A reddish flash at the edge, the slightest projection of the outline, just as the chronometer struck midnight, and at that I told Ogilvy, and he took my place. The night was warm, and I was thirsty, and I went, stretching my legs clumsily, and feeling my way in the darkness, to the little table where the siphon stood, while Ogilvy exclaimed at the streamer of gas that came out towards us. That night, another invisible missile started on its way to the Earth from Mars, just a second or so under 24 hours after the first one. I remember how I sat on the table there in the blackness, with patches of green and crimson swimming before my eyes. I wished I had a light to smoke by, little suspecting the meaning of the minute gleam I had seen, and all that it would presently bring me. Ogilvy watched till 1, and then gave it up, and we lit the lantern and walked over to his house. Down below, in the darkness, were Ottershaw and Chertsey, and all their hundreds of people sleeping in peace. He was full of speculation that night about the condition of Mars, and scoffed at the vulgar idea of its having inhabitants who were signalling us. His idea was that meteorites might be falling in a heavy shower upon the planet, or that a huge volcanic explosion was in progress. He pointed out to me how unlikely it was that organic evolution had taken the same direction in the 2 adjacent planets. The chances of anything coming... The chances against anything man-like on Mars are 1,000,000 to 1, he said. Hundreds of observers saw the flame that night and the night after, about midnight, and again the night after, and so for 10 nights, a flame each night. Why the shots ceased after the 10th, no one on Earth has attempted to explain. It may be the gases of the firing caused the Martians inconvenience. Dense clouds of smoke, or dust, visible through a powerful telescope on Earth as little grey, fluctuating patches, spread through the clearness of the planet's atmosphere and obscured its more familiar features. Even the daily papers woke up to the disturbances at last, and popular notes appeared there, here, and everywhere, concerning the volcanoes upon Mars. The serio-comic periodical Punch, I remember, made a happy use of it in the political cartoon. And, all unsuspected, those missiles the Martians had fired at us drew earthward, rushing now at a pace of many miles a second through the empty gulf of space. Hour by hour, and day by day, nearer and nearer. It seems to me now almost incredibly wonderful that, with that swift fate hanging over us, men could go about their petty concerns as they did. I remember how jubilant Markham was at securing the new photograph of the planet for the illustrated paper he edited in those days. People in these latter times scarcely realise the abundance and enterprise of our 19th century papers. For my own part, I was much occupied in learning to ride the bicycle, and busy upon a series of papers discussing the probable developments of moral ideas as civilization progressed. One night, the first missile then could scarcely have been 10 million miles away, I went for a walk with my wife. It was starlight, and I explained the signs of the zodiac to her, and pointed out Mars, a bright dot of lights creeping zenithwards, towards which so many telescopes were pointed. It was a warm night. Coming home, a party of excursionists from Chertsey or Isleworth passed us singing and playing music. There were lights in the upper windows of the houses as the people went to bed. From the railway station in the distance came the sound of shunting trains, ringing and rumbling, softened almost into melody by the distance. My wife pointed out to me the brightness of the red, green, and yellow signal lights, hanging in a framework against the sky. It seemed so safe and tranquil. And so ends chapter 1. I've had the book close to me, and now chat seems further away. Hang on. Thank you, Carrot. I'm glad you like it. Thank you for the shout out, Space Bunny, to Carrot Top. Can't stay long because church, but we'll host. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Stream it to church. Oh, good. I'm glad the timer came through. If I am reading, I will catch up with chat at the end of the current chapter. I'm not ignoring you. There we go. I'm making sure that's coming through several times so that people don't miss it. I love that everyone is silent, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, I was expecting people to come by and think, oh, it's Robo, let's do the R command, let's do Lego Shark. And it's like, well, I don't want to be reading and then listen to the sound of the Lego Shark. You know, the Lego Shark is fun, of course. But this is a chill stream. And I hope I'm doing it well. And I like that the candles are lighting me up very well. Hello, Iceberg. Hello, Will. How you doing? Apologies if I'm not so hyper as normal. This is just about me reading a story and you guys listening. I don't know what this is going to be like on YouTube. I guess I'll find out when I upload it later. But yeah, for now, things are good, it seems. Twitch hasn't told me off. Still says I'm live. And we're 20 minutes in, so it took about, I would say, 15 minutes to read the first chapter. And chapter 2 is, 3 pages long. Page 8 to 11. We can probably discuss or react. Yeah, please do. Enjoy your story. I'll be in and out, I think. Thanks, Will. Robo, yes, Carrot. Would you want to stop and discuss between chapters? I guess if people had something to say, we could discuss something. Yeah, did you have something in mind? I wouldn't want to spend too much time doing it, though, because, hang on, how many chapters have we got to deal with in total? I'm not going to do this very often. I think this might be a bi-weekly thing, so I might not do it until the Sunday after next. Although I think the Sunday after next... No, the Sunday after next I will be here, so it's fine. It's the Saturday I'm going away. It's 80 pages of book 1. Oh, okay. There's 140 pages total. So, I mean, let's just see how we get through with this stream. It can be easiest for us to tune out if it's just you reading. We'll do our own Lego Shark. Nah. But yeah, what did you think of that chapter? I was surprised at how well I could read it. I mean, obviously I'm talking from a book perspective, not the story. Because, I mean, again, this was written in the 1890s or something, wasn't it? It was written, like, in his time, h.g. Wells. God, this edition is from 1988, wow. So obviously, like, the wording, much like Tolkien's books, the wording can throw me off occasionally, as you probably noticed. But yeah, I like the build-up. it's so much build up. Like almost nothing happens. It's just saying like, look, we were ignorant. The aliens are coming, and we were ignorant. That's the whole premise of the first chapter. Is just him saying, look, there was all these signs, and we just went about our daily lives as if nothing was going to happen. We didn't take heed of the warning. It is a little different than Christmas Carol, indeed. Anyway, so if you like that, then you're fine here. I only know Christmas Carol through the Muppets, honestly. He takes pains to set the scene. He does indeed. Space Money answered a question I didn't know I had. I knew someone whose gamer tag was Ogilvy, or however it's spelled. Now I think I know where it came from. Yeah, could well be. You might have noticed in the line... Where is it? Yeah, here we go. This is Ogilvy's line. He says, the chances against anything man-like on Mars are 1,000,000 to 1. But instantly, when I read the chances of anything, I thought of the musical, where it goes, the chances of anything coming from Mars are 1,000,000 to 1, he said. And I read it like that, and then I thought, no, it doesn't say that. It says, the chances against anything man-like on Mars are 1,000,000 to 1. I guess the musical made it more inclusive. It's not man-like, it's just, phone, be quiet. You're interrupting the vibe. There we go. I've noticed that I've got my reading voice on. I know this isn't how I sound when I'm streaming, is it? I don't know if it's because I haven't got my headphones on. Were you aware that the radio broadcast of this story caused a panic? Indeed, I did, and it was read by h.g.wells, wasn't it? Because that's what it is. It's from the perspective of a journalist, so it is written for people to consume as if this was printed in a newspaper. In fact, that's how it was printed, wasn't it? It was printed in a newspaper, in little sections. That's why it's like the first chapter is only a few pages long, and then it's just all added up into like a single book and then a second book. But obviously nowadays the books are easier to publish; they can put 2 in one volume. Currently, Mars is the only planet inhabited by robots. That is true. That is a scary thought, actually. Robot uprising at some point. I think it was serialised in newspapers, yes, indeed. Much like Sherlock Holmes. Exactly, yeah. Wasn't Jeeves and Wooster serialised in newspapers as well? I think that might have been, because they were short stories, for sure. Yeah, any other questions about chapter 1, or shall we continue? I don't mind if people tune out. If they find my voice just kind of background noise, that's even better. It's nice to know that people can listen to me, without listening to me, if you mean. You've only just heard of Jeeves and Wooster. Oh, wow, carrot. It's like a classic British pairing of like a rich kid. Well, rich kid, he's more like a young adult, but he's so rich that he hardly has to do anything. And Wooster is his butler. And it's mostly comedic. I think it is almost entirely comedic. Wooster will get into scrapes, and then Jeeves has the answer to get him out of it. Oh, I see, you never would have heard of it if you didn't watch BBC. Yeah, it's a BBC thing. Hugh Laurie, Stephen Fry, both did a Jeeves and Wooster series, which I have seen, and it was... I don't really remember it, but it was good. But it's time for chapter 2. So sit back. And again, this is only... Yeah, wow. There's where chapter 2 begins. There's where it ends. So this is going to be a short one. But I will be back with chat in just a second. So, chapter 2, The Falling Star. Then came the night of the first falling star. It was seen early in the morning, rushing over Winchester eastward, a line of flame high in the atmosphere. Hundreds must have seen it, and taken it for an ordinary falling star. Albin described it as leaving a greenish streak behind it that glowed for some seconds. Denning, our greatest authority on meteorites, stated that the height of its first appearance was about 90 or 100 miles. It seemed to him that it fell to Earth about 100 miles east of him. I was at home at that hour and writing in my study, and although my French windows faced towards Ottershaw, and the blind was up, for I loved in those days to look up at the night sky, I saw nothing of it. Yet this strangest of all things that ever came to earth from outer space must have fallen while I was sitting there, visible to me had I only looked up as it passed. Some of those who saw its flight say it travelled with a hissing sound. I myself heard nothing of that. Many people in Berkshire, Surrey, and Middlesex must have seen the fall of it, and, at most, have thought that another meteorite had descended. No one seems to have troubled to look for the fallen mass that night. But very early in the morning, poor Ogilvy, who had seen the shooting star, and who was persuaded that a meteorite lay somewhere on the common between Horsell, Ottershaw, and Woking, rose early with the idea of finding it. Find it he did soon after dawn, and not far from the sandpits. An enormous hole had been made by the impact of the projectile, and the sand and gravel had been flung violently in every direction over the heath and heather, forming heaps visible a mile and a half away. The heather was on fire eastward, and a thin blue smoke rose against the dawn. The thing itself lay almost entirely buried in sand. Amidst the scattered splinters of a fir tree, it had shivered to fragments in its descent. The uncovered part had the appearance of a huge cylinder, caked over, and its outline softened by a thick, scaly, dun-coloured incrustation. It had a diameter of about 30 yards. He approached the mass, surprised at the size and more so at the shape, since most meteorites are rounded more or less completely. It was, however, still so hot from its flight through the air as to forbid his near approach. A stirring noise within its cylinder he ascribed to the unequal cooling of its surface, for at that time it had not occurred to him that it might be hollow. He remained standing at the edge of the pit that the thing had made for itself, staring at its strange appearance, astonished chiefly at its unusual shape and colour, and dimly perceiving even then some evidence of design in its arrival. The early morning was wonderfully still, and the sun, just clearing the pine trees towards Weybridge, was already calm. He did not remember hearing any birds that morning. There was certainly no breeze stirring, and the only sounds were the faint movements from within the cindery cylinder. He was all alone on the common. Then suddenly he noticed with a start that some of the grey clinker, the ashy incrustation that covered the meteorite, was falling off the circular edge of the end. It was dropping off in flakes and raining down upon the sand. A large piece suddenly came off and fell with a sharp noise that brought his heart into his mouth. For a minute he scarcely realised what this meant, and although the heat was excessive, he clambered down into the pit close to the bulk to see the thing more clearly. He fancied even then that the cooling of the body might account for this, but what disturbed that idea was the fact that the ash was falling only from the end of the cylinder. And then he perceived that, very slowly, the circular top of the cylinder was rotating on its body. It was such a gradual movement that he discovered it only through noticing that a black mark that had been near him 5 minutes ago was now at the other side of the circumference. Even then he scarcely understood what this indicated, until he heard a muffled grating sound and saw the black mark jerk forward an inch or so. Then the thing came upon him in a flash. The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. "Good heavens!" said Ogilvy. "There's a man in it! Men in it! Half roasted to death, trying to escape!" At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the flash upon Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat, and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal. At that, he stood irresolute for a moment, then turned, scrambled out of the pit, and set off running wildly into Woking. The time then must have been somewhere about 6 o'clock. He met a waggoner, and tried to make him understand, but the tale he told, and his appearance, were so wild, his hat had fallen off in the pit, that the man simply drove on. He was equally unsuccessful with the potman, who was just unlocking the doors of the public house by Horsell Bridge. The fellow thought he was a lunatic at large, and made an unsuccessful attempt to shut him into the tap room. That sobered him a little, and when he saw Henderson, the London journalist, in his garden, he called over the palings and made himself understood. "Henderson," he called, "you saw that shooting star last night?" "Well," said Henderson. "It's out on Horsell Common now." "Good Lord," said Henderson. "Fallen meteorite, that's good." "But it's something other than meteorite. It's a cylinder. An artificial cylinder, man. And there's something inside." Henderson stood up with his spade in his hand. "What's that?" he said. He is deaf in one ear. Ogilvy told him all that he had seen. Henderson was a minute or so taking it in. Then he dropped his spade, snatched at his jacket, and came out into the road. The two men hurried back at once to the common, and found the cylinder still lying in the same position, but now the sounds inside had ceased, and a thin circle of bright metal showed between the top and the body of the cylinder. Air was either entering or escaping at the rim with a thin, sizzling sound. They listened, rapped on the scale with a stick, and, meeting with no response, they both concluded that man or men inside must be insensible or dead. Of course, the two were quite unable to do anything. They shouted consolation and promises, and went off back to the town again to get help. One can imagine them, covered with sand, excited and disordered, running up the little street in the bright sunlight, just as the shop folks were taking down their shutters and people were opening their bedroom windows. Henderson went into the railway station at once in order to telegraph the news to London. The newspaper articles had prepared men's minds for the reception of the idea. By 8 o'clock, a number of boys and unemployed men had already started for the common to see the dead men from Mars. That was the form the story took. I heard of it first from my newspaper boy, about 9:15, when I went out to get my daily chronicle. I was naturally startled, and lost no time in going out and across the Ottershaw Bridge to the sandpits. So ends chapter 2. Hissing flame. Yeah. Better than pissing flame after hot sauce. Come on, space. That's not where it comes out. Over heath and heather. What have they done? Oh, wow. So the line about Henderson being deaf in one ear, that made me chuckle. But what was the thing earlier? Hang on. Something made me laugh earlier. Oh, it was when Ogilvy went to... Yeah. When Ogilvy went to go and raise the alarm. Where is it? Yeah, okay. So he met a wagoner and tried to make him understand, but the tale he told and his appearance were so wild, and then it just says his hat had fallen off in the pit. Like, his hat is what made him dignified and reasonable. I thought that was quite funny. But I mean, like wearing a hat of some kind was like a symbol of status, wasn't it? That's why you picture Victorian England with people wearing top hats, and even as far back as the 18th century, the century before this one, with like the age of exploration and the beginning of industrialization. You've got people like wearing hats as a sign of captaincy on ships and whatever. Hats were important, and they're still important even in the setting of this. So I just think it's interesting to note that somebody's missing hat makes them look a bit loony. Also, this wagoner thought. Yeah. I briefly considered doing accents, but I thought, no, it's just, once you assign a character with an accent, you've got to stick with that accent every time they say something. And that'll just be too much to think of, so I'd rather just read it as it is. I was going to say, mental note, secure hat, to be taken seriously by wagoners. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Listen to me. No, I'm not going to listen to you. You're not wearing a hat. Oh, sorry. Just put the hat on. Right, listen to me. Yes, sir. What can I do you? What can I do you for? Wow. And today, of course, the hat that asserts dominance is, of course, the fedora. Milady. No, come on, don't be silly. We're here to read a book. So 2 chapters in. Has anyone not familiar with the story before. I mean, really, I shouldn't have given it away at the start to say what it was all about, but I mean, it's there. That's what happens. Wearing a hat was to aid eat aid heat related issues. So lack of a hat usually meant people possibly heat stroke. Oh, of course, yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. Obviously, that is the practical uh, application of wearing a hat. But yeah, I think certainly by these times it was more. Wait, spoilers? There's aliens? No, no, that's it's a giant insect. That's right. I'm not saying it was aliens, but it's aliens. Um, how are we doing? We're 40 minutes in. Wow. Okay. I know I was a few minutes late starting. So if it's like 20 minutes per chapter, which it seems to be, um, and I want to do 2 hours, so that's about 6 chapters maybe today. Let's see how we go. Giant sea crabs, the Little Mermaid's Revenge. Yeah, I guess that could be a sea crab with 3 legs. Yeah, yeah. God, it's. I mean, a tripod works, like it does stand up, but it's hard to imagine it walking. I think whatever those tripod things are in Half Life, I think they get it right in how they walk. Um, it's sort of ambling almost. It's not very quick or agile or nimble, but I think that's the closest approximation as to how the tripods would walk. In the Spielberg one, I think they kind of cheated a bit because they were on like tentacles almost, great big bendy limbs. I would have loved to see an interpretation of this. I'm still waiting for an interpretation of this. I mean, I've got the musical on DVD. The BBC adaptation was good in its first episode, but the rest was just garbage. What I want is this as a film set in the appropriate time period with good visual effects and good storytelling, and then we're done. Striders, walking stabby death and annoyance. Indeed, indeed. Um, so chapter 3. Let me just have another little swig of water. Got to wet my whistle. Chapter 3. On Horsell Common. Uh, okay, the Stone Philosopher Leo, thank you for the follow again. And Carrot and Mute, thank you guys both so much for the host, by the way. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Chapter 3. On Horsell Common. I found a little crowd of perhaps 20 people surrounding the huge hole in which the cylinder lay. I have already described the appearance of that colossal bulk embedded in the ground. The turf and gravel about it seemed charred as if by a sudden explosion. No doubt its impact had caused a flash of fire. Henderson and Ogilvy were not there. I think they perceived that nothing was to be done for the present, and had gone away to breakfast at Henderson's house. There were 4 or 5 boys sitting at the edge of the pit, with their feet dangling and amusing themselves, until I stopped them, by throwing stones at the giant mass. After I had spoken to them about it, they began playing at touch in and out of the group of bystanders. Among these were a couple of cyclists, a jobbing gardener I employed sometimes, a girl carrying a baby, Greg the butcher and his little boy, and 2 or 3 loafers and golf caddies, who were accustomed to hang about the railway station. There was very little talking. Few of the common people in England had anything but the vaguest astronomical ideas in those days. Most of them were staring quietly at the big table-like end of the cylinder, which was still as Ogilvy and Henderson had left it. I fancy the popular expectation of a heap of charred corpses was disappointed at this inanimate bulk. Some went away while I was still there, and other people came. I clambered into the pit and fancied I heard a faint movement under my feet. The top had certainly ceased to rotate. It was only when I got thus close to it that the strangeness of this object was all evident to me. At the first glance, it was really no more exciting than an overturned carriage or a tree blown across the road. Not so much so, indeed. It looked like a rusty gas float, half buried. More than anything else in the world, it required a certain amount of scientific education to perceive that the grey scale of the thing was no common oxide, that the yellowish-white metal that gleamed in the crack between the lid and the cylinder had an unfamiliar hue. Extraterrestrial had no meaning for most of the onlookers. At that time, it was quite clear in my own mind that the thing had come from the planet Mars. But I judged it improbable that it contained any living creature. I thought the unscrewing might be automatic. In spite of Ogilvy, I still believed that there were men in Mars. My mind ran fancifully on the possibilities of its containing manuscript, on the difficulties in translation that might arise, whether we should find coins and models in it, and so forth. Yet it was a little too large for assurance on this idea. I felt an impatience to see it opened. About 11, as nothing seemed happening, I walked back, full of such thoughts, to my home in Maybury. But I found it difficult to get to work upon my abstract investigations. In the afternoon, the appearance of the Common had altered very much. The early editions of the evening papers had startled London with enormous headlines. "A message received from Mars," "Remarkable story from Woking," and so forth. In addition, Ogilvy's wire to the Astronomical Exchange had roused every observatory in the three kingdoms. There were half a dozen flies or more from the Woking station standing in the road by the sandpits, a basket chaise from Cobham, and a rather lordly carriage. Besides that, there was quite a heap of bicycles. In addition, a large number of people must have walked, in spite of the heat of the day, from Woking and Chertsey, so that there was altogether quite a considerable crowd, one or two gaily dressed ladies among the others. It was glaringly hot, not a cloud in the sky, nor a breath of wind, and the only shadow was that of a few scattered pine trees. The burning heather had been extinguished, but the level ground towards Ottershaw was blackened as far as one could see, and still giving off vertical streamers of smoke. An enterprising sweet tough dealer in the Chobham Road had sent up his son with a barrow-load of green apples and ginger beer. Going to the edge of the pit, I found it occupied by a group of about half a dozen men, Henderson, Ogilvy, and a tall, fair-haired man that I had afterwards learned was Stent, the astronomer royal, with several workmen wielding spades and pickaxes. Stent was giving directions in a clear, high-pitched voice. He was standing on the cylinder, which was now evidently much cooler. His face was crimson and streaming with perspiration, and something seemed to have irritated him. A large portion of the cylinder had been uncovered, although its lower end was still embedded. As soon as Ogilvy saw me among the staring crowd on the edge of the pit, he called to me to come down, and asked me if I would mind going over to see Lord Hilton, the lord of the manor. The growing crowd, he said, was becoming a serious impediment to their excavations, especially the boys. They wanted a light railing put up, and help to keep the people back. He told me that a faint stirring was occasionally still audible within the case, but that the workmen had failed to unscrew the top, as it afforded no grip to them. The case appeared to be enormously thick, and it was possible that the faint sounds we heard represented a noisy tumult in the interior. I was very glad to do as he asked, and so become one of the privileged spectators within the contemplated I was very glad to do as he asked, and so become one of the privileged spectators within the contemplated enclosure. I failed to find Lord Hilton at his house, but I was told he was expected from London by the 6 o'clock train from Waterloo. And as it was then about 5:15, I went home, had some tea, and walked up to the station to waylay him. And that, believe it or not, is the end of chapter 3. It's literally like 2 pages long. It's that to that. So, right. Sorry, what have I missed? Note the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen version. For War of the Worlds? Were they in that? I don't remember that. UFO lands, breakfast time. Yeah, same. Eve, hello. Ah, this was Eve's idea. Eve, are you okay? How you doing? How am I doing? This was partially your idea. You told me Ergie was doing it, and that inspired me to do it. So it's technically your fault that I'm doing this, but I'm enjoying it. Good job, Robo. Thank you. Get some water. Yeah, I've got it. Eve is a maze. She is. How dare? What do you mean? How dare? No, you. No, you. Hey, come on. Come on, you've got an emote for that. Don't just use the text. You've got an emote for that. Both you. Nah. Right back at you. I have sign. I have... pending. Let me tell you. Tell me what. Oh yeah, we are discussing the chapters. I wasn't sure what was meant by there were half a dozen flies or more from the Woking station standing in the road by the sandpits. What does it mean by flies? FLYS. Flies. I have this sign, Robojank. Yeah, Robojank. Do I want to keep Robojank? I made that in Paint because I said that would be a fun thing to do. I did that for my affiliate stream. It's an old spelling of flies. Yeah, but what does it mean by flies? Standing in the road by the sandpits. Why would they be standing? What are they? Flies. Is it meant to be fillies? I don't know. House flies? But why would the house flies be noticeable and bar flies, as in... That could be it, Space Bunny. Eve, all the subs people have given, they have not subbed this account. So I don't have my own emotes on this account. Well, yeah, you got to sub Eve Bellegarde to Temperance Tarot so that that account gets the emotes. And the money's going to yourself, so it's not like you're like giving money for nothing. That's what I did with my bot account. I know. Oh, okay. Alright, fine. Did I just mansplain? I'm sorry. Oh god. I will soon. Cool. What else is there to note from this? It's a very short chapter, and again, I think that just lends credit to the fact that it started in a newspaper column. You're a fixer, Robo. No shame. I don't fix. I break. I break everything. That's why I'm so good with Lego. Right. Was there anything else we want to discuss about that? There's not really much to discuss, is there? It's just too short. Too short a chapter. And again, it's all the chapters we've had so far are just build up. You break bun. If I make you laugh, technically, that's breaking someone, isn't it? Like, oh, that's so funny. You've broken me. You see? So there we go. See, doesn't have to be violent. Not a violent breaking. Or a heartbreak. It can be just a humour break. A humorous break. Space Bunny, I break and fix. Yeah, because you work in IT. Yeah. Chapter 4 then? Shall we proceed? Let me just have another swig. Bun gets broken enough. Ah. Mostly because I am already broken inside. Space, you're only human. We're all broken. Off topic. I will get to the chapter in a second. But I was watching Bill Bailey earlier. I was watching a Bill Bailey video, and he did this great gag where when you're in America or Australia, if you ask how someone is, they say, "Oh, I'm awesome. I'm good. I'm great. Thank you. How was your day been? Oh, it's been totally awesome, mate. Yeah." Like everybody's really positive. But he said that if you ask the same question to somebody in Britain, the general opinion of the nation is that things could always be worse. So if you ask a British person how they are, they say, not too bad. Like, I'm not terrible, but I'm not great, so I'm not as bad as I could be. And I just thought that is so accurate. We are absolutely a nation of pessimists. It's like, in a way you could say optimists, because it's like, things could always be worse, but it's still like, It does sound like Britain, yeah. What Carrot said? I'm assembling a chair. What? What Carrot said? What did Carrot say? What's that got to do with assembling a chair? Oh, you got your chair. Ooh, I want pictures. Take pictures. Put it in the Discord. Put it in the hardware home. Is it hardware or hall hovel? I suppose it could be both because it's hardware, but it's also stuff that you've bought. So yeah. This is what Carrot said. No you. Shush. Stop it. Get out. Please don't get out. Stay here. Listen to me read. But don't. Do stay here, but don't. Okay. We used to get raided by Viking and all sorts of people. Viking? Who's Viking? Insert me holding up sign. No, I'm not gonna. No, it doesn't count. Emote or nothing. Sorry, Eve. Sorry, not sorry. Chapter 4. The cylinder unscrews. When I returned to the common, the sun was setting. Scattered groups were hurrying from the direction of Woking, and 1 or 2 persons were returning. The crowd about the pit had increased, and stood out black against the lemon yellow of the sky. A couple of 100 people, perhaps. There were a number of voices raised, and some sort of struggle appeared to be going on about the pit. Strange imaginings passed through my mind. As I drew nearer, I heard Stent's voice. "Keep back! Keep back!" A boy came running towards me. "It's a moving," he said to me as he passed. "A screwing and a screwing out. I don't like it. I'm a-going home, I am." I went on to the crowd. There were really, I should think, 200 or 300 people elbowing and jostling one another. The 1 or 2 ladies there being by no means the least active. "He's fallen in the pits!" cried someone. "Keep back!" said several. The crowd swayed a little, and I elbowed my way through. Everyone seemed greatly excited. I heard a peculiar humming sound from the pit. "I say," said Ogilvy, "help keep these idiots back. We don't know what's in the confounded thing, you know." I saw a young man, a shop assistant in Woking, I believe he was, standing on the cylinder and trying to scramble out of the hole again. The crowd had pushed him in. The end of the cylinder was being screwed out from within. Nearly 2 feet of shining screw projected. Somebody blundered against me, and I narrowly missed being pitched onto the top of the screw. I turned, and as I did so, the screw must have come out, and the lid of the cylinder fell upon the gravel with a ringing concussion. I stuck my elbow into the person behind me and turned my head towards the thing again. For a moment, that circular cavity seemed perfectly black. I had the sunset in my eyes. I think everyone expected me to see a man emerge, possibly something a little unlike us terrestrial men, but in all essentials, a man. I know I did. But, looking, I presently saw something stirring within the shadow. Greyish, billowy movements, one above another, and then 2 luminous discs-like eyes. Then something resembling a little grey snake, about the thickness of a walking stick, coiled up out of the writhing middle, and wriggled in the air towards me, and then another. A sudden chill came over me. There was a loud shriek from a woman behind. I half turned, keeping my eyes fixed upon the cylinder still, from which other tentacles were now projecting, and began pushing my way back from the edge of the pit. I saw astonishment giving place to horror on the faces of the people about me. I heard inarticulate exclamations on all sides. There was a general movement backward. I saw the shopman struggling still on the edge of the pit. I found myself alone, and saw the people on the other side of the pit running off, Stent among them. I looked again at the cylinder, and ungovernable horror gripped me. I stood petrified and staring. A big, greyish, rounded bulk, the size of perhaps a bear, was rising slowly and painfully out of the cylinder. As it bulged up and caught the light, it glistened like wet leather. 2 large, dark-coloured eyes were regarding me steadfastly. It was rounded, and had, one might say, a face. There was a mouth under the eyes, the lipless brim of which quivered and slavered, and dropped saliva. The body heaved and pulsated convulsively. A lank, tentacular appendage gripped the edge of the cylinder, another swayed in the air. Those who have never seen a living Martian can scarcely imagine the strange horror of their appearance. The peculiar V-shaped mouth with its pointed upper lip, the absence of brow ridges, the absence of a chin beneath the wedge-like lower lip, the incessant quivering of this mouth, the gorgon groups of tentacles, the tumultuous breathing of the lungs in a strange atmosphere, the evident heaviness and painfulness of movement, due to the greater gravitational energy of the earth. Above all, the extraordinary intensity of the immense eyes, culminated in an effect akin to nausea. There was something fungoid in the oily brown skin, something in the clumsy deliberation of their tedious movements unspeakably terrible. Even at this first encounter, this first glimpse, I was overcome with disgust and dread. Suddenly, the monster vanished. It had toppled over the brim of the cylinder and fallen into the pit, with a thud like the fall of a great mass of leather. I heard it give a peculiar thick cry, and forthwith another of these creatures appeared in the deep shadow of the aperture. At that, my rigour of terror passed away. I turned and, running madly, made for the first group of trees, perhaps 100 yards away, but I ran slantingly and stumbling, for I could not avert my face from these things. There, among some young pine trees and furze bushes, I stopped, panting, and waited further developments. The common, round the sandpits, was dotted with people, standing, like myself, in a half-fascinated terror, staring at these creatures, or rather, at the heaped gravel at the edge of the pit in which they lay. And then, with a renewed horror, I saw a round, black object bobbing up and down on the edge of the pit. It was the head of the shopman, who had fallen in, but showing as a little black object against the hot western sky. Now he got his shoulder and knee up, and again he seemed to slick back until only his head was visible. Suddenly he vanished, and I could have fancied a faint shriek had reached me. I had a momentary impulse to go back and help him, that my fears overruled. Everything was then quite invisible, hidden by the deep pit and the heap of sand that the fall of the cylinder had made. Anyone coming along the road from Chobham or Woking would have been amazed at the sight. A dwindling multitude of perhaps 100 people or more, standing in a great irregular circle, in ditches, behind bushes, behind gates and hedges, saying little to one another. And that in short, excited shouts and staring hard at a few heaps of sand. The barrow of ginger beer stood a queer derelict black against the burning sky, and in the sand pits was a row of deserted vehicles, with their horses feeding out of nosebags or pawing the ground. That's chapter 4. They're very short chapters, aren't they? Very short chapters indeed. Chicken. There are no sound alerts, Sith is dope. It's a chill stream. No sound alerts today. You can just sit back and enjoy the reading. Oh, it's a book. It is a book. A book indeed. I just wanted to try something different and see how it was. I know you're all here for the sound alerts and the chaos, but there is none of that here today. I'm just. This is therapeutic. Thank you. Well, I hope it is. I need this. Oh, thank you, Sithis. How kind. I mean, you still tried to lead in with a chicken, but sorry, I'll let that slide. So yeah, it's literally I'm reading a chapter at a time, and then spending 5 minutes catching up with chat if I need to. Although there's not much to catch up on today, and we're also sort of discussing the chapters a little bit. That's just a sign of my presence, really. Oh, I see. Right, okay. So, Katie from the Sticks does the base command as her customary greeting. Eve does the and now you've got chicken. So slowly people are claiming the sound alerts that they like to use to introduce themselves to the chat. And chicken is yours. What is there to discuss about this chapter? I found this quite difficult to read, to be honest. Those opening lines. I was having a bit of trouble with it, wasn't I? Or was that previous? I don't know. Exactly. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Um, yeah, I love the description of the alien because it's not like the description of a typical Martian, like in something like Destroy All Humans, where it's just got big eyes and a big head and maybe shorter than the average human. It's nothing like that. It's almost oh, what's his name? Lovecraftian, with the tentacles and like sort of oddly shaped mouth and eyes, like lidless eyes, no eyebrows. It's just a complete mass of some kind of flesh. Something. I mean, I know Lovecraft. He kind of describes things as an indescribable horror, you know, with only little subtleties. Because it's like the idea of his readings is that it's horror unimaginable. So therefore, if you can't imagine it, you can't describe it. So you have to sort of think of the most horrible thing in your head. But I love the efforts that Wells has gone to here. So again, a big greyish rounded bulk the size perhaps of a bear. So quite large. So I don't know what bear. It could be like a koala bear. I don't know. No. Oh, thank you, Carrot. Thank you. I'm glad you're still listening and enjoying. Well, I mean, again, if nobody's in the chat, I don't mind because people might just want to listen to the story. You know. Um, would it be better if I was doing straight up reading? I don't know. Would it be better if I didn't speak to chat? I don't know. I mean, part of the thing, the reason I love streaming is to engage with chat. So, here we are. um, so I don't mind stopping to catch up with chat, just to say hello to everyone and greet anyone who I've missed. Chat interaction is good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But obviously, I don't want to interrupt the story every time, so I'd rather read a chapter, go with chat. In fact, it was going to be a straight up 5 minutes, but it seems to be varying in how long it takes to catch up with chat. And I think 5 minutes might be a bit too long. But we've done 4 chapters in an hour, so I think we might even get to chapter 8 before ending. Thank you. Yes. No, thank you. No, you. Always no you. I'm going to have a swig of more water and then I'm going to fill it up again because it's a bit, well, not a bit, it is completely, it will be completely empty. I might even get something a bit flavourful. You could name names, but there are some bigger streamers who just don't interact with chat. Glad you're not one of them. Yeah, I mean, when you're a bigger streamer and you've got more viewers and you've got more people in chat, it would just get impossible to just constantly go back to chat because there would just be so much activity in it, even in slow mode. Because slow mode only applies to the user, it doesn't apply to the chat itself. It just means that you can only take 2 minutes to say something. But if 4,000 people are watching, or even 100 people are watching, that's still quite a lot. They don't even attempt. Oh, okay, well that's a different story. Yeah, yeah. So the person I can think of is Kean Fitz, who Eve knows. He's Irish Jesus. He just does music streams. He gets his guitar out and just does covers of songs. People can request it. And he's not reading every single line, but he does glance at it and he does respond to things and he listens to the mods and that, which I think is quite nice. And he is partner level as well. He's recently became partner on Twitch. So that's the inspiration to get to. Yeah, okay, so I'm just going to quickly top up. I will not be long. My kitchen is literally right there. I did my dishes earlier like a good boy. Enjoy looking at the books. I really like the candles. Look, 2 candles are giving off that light, and the green screen isn't even struggling. The chroma key isn't struggling. House tour. Yeah, this is my library. Sorry, yeah. Here, there's like a invisible door that I go through. That's why I cut off here. Honestly, there's not much to tour, and I can't really move my webcam around that much, so no tour today. Right, a drink. Gotta go. Take care, everybody. Thank you, Carrot. Catch you later. Thank you for hanging out. And thank you for your support as always. You legend. Okay. Well, I can't let you see that because it's got my full name on it, but it is my bookmark. Look forward to seeing your VOD. Thank you. Yeah, this will be going up tomorrow at 2:30. Chapter 5. The Heat Ray. After the glimpse I had had of the Martians emerging from the cylinder in which they had come to Earth from their planet, a kind of fascination paralysed my actions. I remained standing knee-deep in the heather, staring at the mound that hid them. I was a battleground of fear and curiosity. I did not dare to go back towards the pit, but I felt a passionate longing to peer into it. I began walking, therefore, in a big curve, seeking some point of vantage, and continually looking at the sand heaps that hid these newcomers to our Earth. Once a leash of thin black whips, like the arms of an octopus, flashed across the sunset, and was immediately withdrawn, and afterwards a thin rod rose up, point by point, bearing at its apex a circular disc that spun with a wobbling motion. What could be going on here? Most of the spectators had gathered in one or two groups. One a little crowd towards Woking, the other a knot of people in the direction of Chobham. Evidently, they shared my mental conflict. There were few near me. One man I approached. He was, I perceived, a neighbour of mine, though I did not know his name, and accosted. But it was scarcely a time for inarticulate conversation. "What ugly brutes!" he said. "Good God, what ugly brutes!" He repeated this over and over again. "Did you see a man in the pit?" I said, but he made no answer to that. We became silent, and stood watching for a time side by side, deriving, I fancy, a certain comfort in one another's company. Then I shifted my position to a little knoll that gave me the advantage of a yard or more of elevation, and when I looked for him, presently, he was walking towards Woking. The sunset faded to twilight before anything further happened. The crowd, far away on the left, towards Woking, seemed to grow, and I heard now a faint murmur from it. The little knot of people towards Chobham dispersed. There was scarcely an intimation of movement from the pit. It was this, as much as anything, that gave people courage, and I suppose the new arrivals from Woking also helped to restore confidence. At any rate, as the dusk became on, a slow, intermittent movement upon the sandpits began, a movement that seemed to gather force as the stillness of the evening about the cylinder remained unbroken. Vertical black figures in two and threes would advance, stop, watch, and advance again, spreading out as they did so in a thin, irregular crescent that promised to enclose the pit in its attenuated horns. I, too, on my side, began to move towards the pit. Then I saw some cabmen, and others had walked boldly onto the sandpits, and heard the clatter of hoofs and the grind of wheels. I saw a lad trundling off the barrow of apples, and then, within 30 yards of the pit, advancing from the direction of Horsell, I noted a little black knot of men, the foremost of whom was waving a white flag. This was the deputation. There had been a hasty consultation, and, since the Martians were evidently, in spite of their repulsive forms, intelligent creatures, it had been resolved to show them, by approaching them with signals, that we, too, were intelligent. Flutter, flutter went the flag, first to the right, then to the left. It was too far for me to recognise anyone there, but afterwards I learned that Ogilvy, Stent, and Henderson were with others in this attempt at communication. This little group had, in its advance, dragged inwards, so to speak, the circumference of the now almost complete circle of people, and a number of dim black figures followed it at discreet distances. Suddenly there was a flash of light, and a quantity of luminous greenish smoke came out of the pit in 3 distinct puffs, which drove up, one after another, straight into the still air. This smoke, or flame perhaps, would be the better word for it, was so bright that the deep blue sky overhead and the hazy stretches of brown common towards Chertsey, set with black pine trees, seemed to darken abruptly as these puffs rose, and to remain the darker after their disposal. At the same time, a faint hissing sound became audible. Beyond the pit stood the little wedge of people, with the white flag at its apex, arrested by these phenomena, a little knot of small black vertical shapes upon the black ground. As the green smoke rose, their faces flashed out in pallid green, and faded again as it vanished. Then slowly the hissing passed into a humming, into a long, loud, droning noise. Slowly a humped shape rose out of the pit, and the ghost of a beam of light seemed to flicker out from it. Forthwith flashes of actual flame, a bright glare leaping from one to another, sprang from the scattered group of men. It was as if some invisible jet impinged upon them and flashed into white flame. It was as if each man suddenly had and momentarily turned to fire. Then, by the light of their own destruction, I saw them staggering and falling, and their supporters turning to run. I stood staring, not as yet realizing that this was death leaping from man to man in that little distant crowd. All I felt was that it was something strange, an almost noiseless and blinding flash of light, and a man fell headlong and lay still, and as the unseen shaft of heat passed over them, pine trees burst into fire, and every dry furze bush became with one dull thud a mass of flames. And far away towards Knapp Hill, I saw flashes of trees and hedges and wooden buildings suddenly set alight. It was sweeping round swiftly and steadily, this invisible, inevitable sort of sword of heat. I perceived it coming towards me by the flashing bushes it touched, and was too astounded and stupefied to stir. I heard the crackle of fire in the sandpits, and the sudden squeal of a horse that was as suddenly stilled. Then it was as if an invisible yet intensely heated finger was drawn through the heather between me and the Martians, and all along a curving line beyond the sandpits the dark ground smoked and crackled. Something fell with a crash far away to the left, where the road from Woking Station opens out onto the common. Forthwith the hissing and humming ceased, and the black, dome-like object sank slowly out of sight into the pit. All this had happened with such swiftness that I had stood motionless, dumbfounded and dazzled by the flashes of light. Had that death swept through a full circle, it must inevitably have slain me in my surprise. But it passed, and spared me, and left the night about me suddenly dark and unfamiliar. The undulating common seemed now dark almost to blackness, except where its roadways lay grey and pale under the deep blue sky of the early night. It was dark and suddenly void of men. Overhead the stars were mustering, and in the west the sky was still a pale, bright, almost greenish blue. The tops of the pine trees and the roofs of Horsell came out sharp and black against the western afterglow. The Martians and their appliances were altogether invisible, save for that thin mast upon which their restless mirror wobbled. Patches of bush and isolated trees here and there smoked and glowed still, and the houses towards Woking Station were sending up spires of flame into the stillness of the evening air. Nothing was changed save for that and a terrible astonishment. The little group of black specks with the flag of white had been swept out of existence, and the stillness of the evening, so it seemed to me, had scarcely been broken. It came to me that I was upon this dark common, helpless, unprotected and alone. Suddenly, like a thing falling upon me from without, came fear. With an effort, I turned and began a stumbling run through the heather. The fear I felt was no rational fear, but a panic terror, not only of the Martians, but of the dusk and stillness all around me. Such an extraordinary effect in unmanning me it had that I ran weeping silently as a child will do. Once I had turned, I did not dare to look back. I remember I felt an extraordinary persuasion that I was being played with, that presently, when I was upon the very verge of safety, this mysterious death, as swift as the passage of light, would leap down after me from the pit about the cylinder and strike me down. Ooh, that's chapter 5. God, yeah, really starting to struggle with the words now. But it's good. We'll go until 4. So I've still got a little bit of time. Sithis, I noticed the microphone emote. Was that because my mic was a little bit too far away? Because I think it was more over to my shoulder as opposed to towards my face. I mean, hopefully it was still audible. Audible. Fly Audible, blah, 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 or just tune into Robo Prime Games and he'll read you a book every other Sunday. Unless people want this every Sunday. Which would be kind of nice. You know, it's like after a hyper week with Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, it's like on a Sunday, just chill out for a few hours and read a book. Do we want that? Let me know. This is, at the moment, only an experiment. Start your 7-day free trial for 5 billion per second. What? My candle's been burning for a long while. And they smell nice too. They're scented from IKEA. Oh, it's really nice. It's going to be nice when it's in the cold months, isn't it? I'm probably going to use these candles a bit more. I might even order some scented candles, or go to IKEA and actually get them. Because while I'm there, IKEA are going to do their own gaming chairs. So I will put what's left of my IKEA voucher towards that. And I'll have a decent chair to play games with for once, as opposed to this office chair with no headrest or anything. It's just a standard thing. I don't think it's a chair that's meant to be used for entire days of work. I think this is like a meeting chair that you put in a meeting room. I've got no headrest. I slouch a bit too much in this, so I'm hoping that a proper gaming chair will give me that back support. In October indeed. So during or after Spooky Month, I will look into getting one of them chairs. Get myself nice and comfy. But most definitely get you some candles. Yeah. Maybe for the entire... Candles are so nice. They really are. I mean... Oh, they're too far away now, but I don't want to touch these in case I get burnt. Is there something I've got that I can lift it up with and show you? No. They're just a little, like, little tea light ones about that big. And what's good about IKEA is that they come in such a big set and they're so cheap. Oh, absolutely. That's exactly the ones that I've got in front of me. I can't remember what the scent is, though. I think it's some kind of berry. Not raspberry. I think it might be elderberry, maybe. Yeah, the red ones. Yeah. Are they red? Should I just go and get them? That means getting up. We've got chapter 6 to read. Let's read chapter 6, and then I'll catch up and see what you've said. So, don't what? Don't get up? I won't get up. I got like a 12-pack strawberry scented candles for £1. That's what I mean. It's insane. If they're the red ones, they're a mix of berries. That is most probably what I have then. It's because I've had them over a year. I've had them such a long time. I mean, this is the first time I've used them in ages, and it works. I don't know how it looks. How does it look on my gaming scene when I'm lit up purely by candles? Hang on. That noise ruined everything. I'm actually pretty well lit. Wow, but it's not spooky, is it? It's not spooky enough for It's not spooky enough for October. Whoops. There we go. It's that one. IKEA cheap and bussin', hell yeah. I burn through a pack of those pretty quickly, but I light candles all the time. Yeah, I need to do it more. It's so much more cozy, isn't it? I guess it invokes some kind of. I'm pretty well lit. Thank you, Space. I was wondering when you were going to try and fit a quote in. Um, like, I imagine there's some kind of embedded in some sort of what's the word I'm thinking of? Like in our ancestry, like our early ancestors when they were experimenting with fire. I mean, certainly for thousands of years, fire was the only source of light, besides moonlight and sunlight. So I wonder if there's something in our genome that makes us feel comforted and warm by the open flame. You know, ad quote IKEA bussin. What? What does bussin even mean? Bussin? What like an actual bus? The magic bus with that teacher? A magic school bus. That's what it's called. America. Oh, okay. Oh god. Right. Sorry. Chapter 6. Guns. Water. Fire is amazing. It makes everything so cozy, and honestly, there's nothing like the warmth of a fire or the smell of it. Honestly, when I lit these matches to light these candles, that is my favourite smell ever. The smell of like burning wood. Cannot wait for bonfire night. I'm going to find my nearest bonfire. I'm going to jump right on it and just go. That's what I'm going to do. Chapter 6. The Heat Ray in the Chobham Road. It is still a matter of wonder how the Martians are able to slay men so swiftly and so silently. Many think that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat in a chamber of practically absolute non-conductivity. This intense heat they project in a parallel beam against any object they choose by means of a polished parabolic mirror of unknown composition. Much as the parabolic mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. Much as the parabolic mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. But no one has absolutely proved these details. However it is done, it is certain that a beam of heat is the essence of the matter. Heat, and invisible instead of visible light. Whatever is combustible flashes into flame at its touch. Lead runs like water, it softens iron, cracks and melts glass, and when it falls upon water, incontinently, that explodes into steam. That night, nearly 40 people lay under the starlight about the pit, charred and distorted beyond recognition. And all night long, the common from Horsell to Maybury was deserted, and brightly ablaze. The news of the massacre probably reached Chobham, Woking, and Ottershaw about the same time. In Woking, the shops had closed when the tragedy happened, and a number of people, shop people and so forth, attracted by the stories they had heard, were walking over Horsell Bridge and along the road between the hedges that run out at last upon the common. You may imagine the young people brushed up after the labours of the day, and making this novelty, as they would make any novelty, the excuse for walking together and enjoying a trivial flirtation. You may figure to yourself the hum of voices along the road in the gloaming. As yet, of course, few people in Woking even knew that the cylinder had opened, though poor Henderson had sent a messenger on a bicycle to the post office with a special wire to an evening paper. As these folks came out by twos and threes upon the open, they found little knots of people talking excitedly and peering at the spinning mirror over the sandpits, and the newcomers were, no doubt, soon infected by the excitement of the occasion. By 8:30, when the deputation was destroyed, there may have been a crowd of 300 people or more at this place, besides those who had left the road to approach the Martians nearer. There were 3 policemen too, one of whom was mounted, doing their best, under instructions from Stent, to keep the people back and deter them from approaching the cylinder. There was some booing from those more thoughtless and excitable souls to whom a crowd is always an occasion for noise and horseplay. Stent and Ogilvy, anticipating some possibilities of a collision, had telegraphed from Horsell to the barracks as soon as the Martians emerged, for the help of a company of soldiers to protect these strange creatures from violence. After that, they returned to lead that ill-fated advance. The description of their death, as it was seen by the crowd, tallies very closely with my own impressions. The 3 puffs of green smoke, the deep humming note, and the flashes of flame. But that crowd of people had a far narrower escape than mine. Only the fact that a hummock of heathery sand intercepted the lower part of the heat ray saved them. Had the elevation of the parabolic mirror been a few yards higher, none could have lived to tell the tale. They saw the flashes and the men falling, and an invisible hand, as it were, lit the bushes as it hurried towards them through the twilight. Then, with a whistling note that rose above the droning of the pit, the beams swung close over their heads, lighting the tops of the beech trees that lined the road, and splitting the bricks, smashing the windows, firing the window frames, and bringing down in crumbling ruin a portion of the gable of the house nearest the corner. In the sudden thud, hiss, and glare of the igniting trees, the panic-stricken crowd seems to have swayed hesitatingly for some moments. Sparks and burning twigs began to fall into the road, and single leaves like puffs of flame. Hats and dresses caught fire. Then came a cry from the common. There were shrieks and shouts, and suddenly a mounted policeman came galloping through the confusion with his hands clasped over his head, screaming. "They're coming!" a woman shrieked, and incontinently everyone was turning and pushing at those behind in order to clear their way to Woking again. They must have bolted as blindly as a flock of sheep. Where the road grows narrow and black between the high banks, the crowd jammed and a desperate struggle occurred. All that crowd did not escape. 3 persons at least, 2 women and a little boy, were crushed and trampled there and left to die amidst the terror and the darkness. That's chapter 6. That was a bit of a grim ending, wasn't it? Blimey. Again, occasionally there's a sentence that I find a bit weird to read. I don't know whether it's because it's too long or it's just the way a sentence is structured in my head doesn't really compute when it's read. I don't know. But I think if there's anything you want me to go back and try reading again so you can get the meaning of it, let me know. But obviously that means taking note of it and entering it in the chat. So yeah, chapter 6. What do we all think so far? What are we all feeling from the old bookie wookie? Are we enjoying it? Is it easy listening? Given I'm a little biased when it comes to fire because we have a lot of rituals revolving around it, including fire walking. But yeah, fire good. Hulk like fire, Thor like water. Hulk like raging fire, Thor like smouldering fire. Avengers. Sorry, Thor Ragnarok. Good. It's quite enjoyable. Okay. Yeah, obviously, if you're a fan of more contemporary works, this won't be the one. This is over 100 years old, much well over than that now. But I think it's still good sci-fi, and I love the setting of like an alien invasion in Victorian Britain, like advanced technology against like sticks and stones, basically. Like, how would you cope with that? One of the things, I mean, occasionally I take it upon myself to consider writing when an idea comes to me, and an idea that I had is what if there was an alien invasion in medieval times? Like, what would that be like? It would be like this, but 10 times worse, because, you know, in those days, people would be probably thinking, oh God, it's the devil or something, you know. They'd try and burn it at the stake or whatever. You'd get like knights trying to cut through into it or something. Dragons, yeah, I suppose. I wouldn't be surprised if that had already been done. Maybe somebody's explanation of dragons in a fantasy setting is because aliens. But yeah, I like. Because I mean, you think, you know, futuristic sci-fi or even modern sci-fi is so oversaturated now. Give us sci-fi 100+ years ago. Show us what that would have been like in the closest approximation, you know? I mean, the only thing I can think of now is The Time Machine with Guy Pearce. I guess that kind of counts. Um, what else? I can't think of anything else. I'm wondering now if this is something where there's loads of examples and I'm just not thinking of them. Um, right. So let's see. Yeah, chapter 7 is really short, and chapter 8 is really short. Let's see how we can do. We might be able to get both of these done before 4 o'clock. We've got 20 minutes. I think I'm not sure whether to raid or not because this is just a really quiet, chill stream, and like raiding goes against that. It's like raiding is like a hype moment. It's like, hey, let's go and celebrate this guy and give them the audience. But it's like a calm raid. Is there such a thing as a calm raid though? Raiding is chaos. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And again, when it goes from like yesterday when I raided Ivy, it was that worked because it had been a busy day, and we went to an art stream, and she was still cussing till the cows come home. But it was like a nice way to quiet down. Quiet till stream, then raids midnight on Dark Souls 3. Exactly right. Yeah. So, but I don't know. Is it bad of me to not raid? I do raid every other stream I do. I just thought maybe this one it'd be nice to just end. You know. Let me know. Let me know. This is where people say, "You do you. Do what you want," and I'm like, "If I want affirmation." Have another drink. I hope you're all drinking as well. Okay. Chapter 7. How I Reached Home. For my own part, I remember nothing of my flight except the stress of blundering against trees and stumbling through the heather. All about me gathered the invisible terrors of the Martians. That pitiless sword of heat seemed whirling to and fro, flourishing overhead before it descended and smote me out of life. I came into the road between the crossroads and Horsell, and ran along this to the crossroads. At last I could go no farther. I was exhausted with the violence of my emotion and of my flight, and I staggered and fell by the wayside. That was near the bridge that crossed the canal by the gasworks. I fell and lay still. I must have remained there some time. I sat up, strangely perplexed. For a moment, perhaps, I could not clearly understand how I came there. My terror had fallen from me like a garment. My hat had gone, and my collar had burst away from its stud. A few minutes before, there had only been 3 real things before me: the immensity of the night and space and nature, my own feebleness and anguish, and near the approach of death. Now it was as if something turned over, and the point of view altered abruptly. There was no sensible transition from one state of mind to the other. I was immediately the self of every day again, a decent, ordinary citizen. The silent common, the impulse of my flight, the starting flames, were as if it were a dream. I asked myself, had these latter things indeed happened? I still could not credit it. I rose and walked unsteadily up the steep incline of the bridge. My mind was blank wonder. My muscles and nerves seemed drained of their strength. I dare say I staggered drunkenly. A head rose over the arch, and the figure of a workman carrying a basket appeared. Beside him ran a little boy. He passed me, wishing me good night. I was minded to speak to him, and did not. I answered his greeting with a meaningless mumble, and went on over the bridge. Over the Maybury Arch, a train, a billowing tumult of white, violet smoke, and a long caterpillar of lighted windows, went flying south. Clatter, clatter, clap, rap, and it had gone. A dim group of people talked in the gate of one of the houses in the pretty little row of gables that was called Oriental Terrace. It was all so real and so familiar. And that behind me, It was frantic, fantastic. Such things, I told myself, could not be. Perhaps I am a man of exceptional moods. I do not know how far my experience is common. At times, I suffer from the strangest sense of detachment from myself and the world around me. I seem to watch it all from the outside, from somewhere inconceivably remote, out of time, out of space, out of the stress and tragedy of it all. This feeling was very strong upon me that night. Here was another side to my dream. But the trouble was the blank incongruity of this serenity, and the swift death flying yonder, not 2 miles away. There was a noise of business from the gasworks, and the electric lamps were all alight. I stopped at the group of people. "What news from the common?" said I. There were 2 men and a woman at the gate. "Eh?" said one of the men, turning. "What news from the common?" I said. "Ain't you just been there?" asked the men. "People seem fairly silly about the common," said the woman over the gate. "What's it all about?" "Haven't you heard of the men from Mars?" said I. "The creatures from Mars?" "Quite enough," said the woman over the gate. "Thanks." And all 3 of them laughed. I felt foolish and angry. I tried, and found I could not tell them what I had seen. They laughed again at my broken sentences. "You'll hear more yet," I said, and went on to my home. I startled my wife at the doorway, so haggard was I. I went into the dining room, sat down, drank some wine, and so, soon as I could collect myself sufficiently, told her the things I had seen. The dinner, which was a cold one, had already been served, and remained neglected on the table while I told my story. "There is one thing," I said, to allay the fears I had aroused. "They are the most sluggish things I ever saw crawl. They may keep the pit and kill people who come near them, but they cannot get out of it. But the horror of them—" "Don't, dear," said my wife, knitting her brows and putting her hand on mine. "Poor Ogilvy," I said. "To think he may be lying dead there." My wife, at least, did not find my experience incredible. When I saw how deadly white her face was, I ceased abruptly. "They may come here," she said again and again. I pressed her to take wine, and tried to reassure her. "They can scarcely move," I said. I began to comfort her and myself by repeating all that Ogilvy had told me of the impossibility of the Martians establishing themselves on Earth. In particular, I laid stress on the gravitational difficulty. On the surface of the Earth, the force of gravity is 3 times what it is on the surface of Mars. A Martian, therefore, would weigh 3 times more on Mars, albeit his muscular strength would be the same. His own body would be a cope of lead to him, therefore. That indeed was the general opinion. Both the Times and the Daily Telegraph, for instance, insisted on it the next morning, and both overlooked, just as I did, 2 obvious modifying influences. The atmosphere of the Earth, we now know, contains far more oxygen or far less argon, whichever way one likes to put it, than does Mars. The invigorating influences of this excess of oxygen upon the Martians indisputably did much to counterbalance the increased weight of their bodies. And, in the second place, we all overlooked the fact that such mechanical intelligence as the Martian possessed was quite able to dispense with muscular exertion at a pinch. But I did not consider these points at the time, and so my reasoning was dead against the chances of the invaders. With wine and food, the confidence of my own table, and the necessity of reassuring my wife, I grew, by insensible degrees, courageous and secure. "They have done a foolish thing," said I, fingering my wine-glass. "They are dangerous, because no doubt they are mad with terror. Perhaps they expected to find no living things, certainly no intelligent living things. A shell in the pit," said I. "If the worst comes to worst, we'll kill them all." The intense excitement of the events had no doubt left my perceptive powers in a state of erethism. I remember that dinner table with extraordinary vividness even now, my dear wife's sweet, anxious face peering at me from under the pink lampshade. the white cloth with its silver and glass table furniture. For in those days even philosophical writers had many little luxuries. The crimson purple wine in my glass are photographically distinct. At the end of it I sat, tempering nuts with a cigarette, regretting Ogilvy's rashness and denouncing the short-sighted timidity of the Martians. So some respectable dodo in the Mauritius might have lauded it into his nest, and discussed the arrival of that shipful of pitiless sailors in want of animal food. We will peck them to death tomorrow, my dear. I did not know it, but that was the last civilized dinner I was to eat for many strange and terrible days. Whew. God, people are talking. Brick Guy never really raided, did he not? Huh. Don't raid today. You can maybe look into other people who do that. Give them a follow, or just keep them in mind if you really want to. Look into. Oh, sorry, no, I did read it as look into. I didn't see it was info. Not the collar and stud. I know, right? I love how he said that he lost his hat again. The siren. The siren? Sorry, for what? The siren in here? Was that in relation to the book? Oh, hang on. Did a police car go by? I didn't even notice. I'm totally absorbed in the book. Aliens attack, wine o'clock. Exactly. This is couple goals right here. I pressed her to take wine and tried to reassure her. Yeah, I'll have a glass of wine. You might have noticed I pronounced something a bit differently earlier. That was when I think we just call him the journalist. When he goes up to it was a siren from outside. Oh, okay, wow. I'm surprised that was picked up. But I guess when I'm gaming, it's just games noise that you can hear. So I think that they are speaking with a sort of Surrey, maybe pseudo Cockney accent, because the woman at the gate, it's actually written phonetically. It says, "What's it all about?" What's it all about? Hang on, there it is. What's it all about? I wasn't sure. That's all right, love. People seem fair silly about the common. What's it all about? I sound like a roadman then. People seem fair silly about the common, innit? What's it all about, mate? I mean, them Martians are roasting man. No, we're not here for that. That's gaming stream speech. How are we doing? Yeah, I'm going to read chapter 8, which is only, again, 2 pages total. So once I've read chapter 8, we will end. How far is that into book 1? I will just straight up end. Because as you've said, I need to look into other people doing it. Chapter 8 is called Friday Night. So we're that far down of book 1. That's not so bad. So, again, anything to improve this stream or anything that I should take away or add, please use the feedback factory in the Discord. Or just tell me here, because whatever. Okay. Chapter 8. Friday Night. The most extraordinary thing to my mind, of all the strange and wonderful things that happened upon that Friday, was the dovetailing of the commonplace habits of our social order, with the first beginnings of the series of events that was to topple that social order headlong. If on Friday night you had taken a pair of compasses and drawn a circle with a radius of 5 miles around the Woking sandpits, I doubt if you would have had one human being outside it, unless it was some relation of Stent, or of the 3 or 4 cyclists or London people who lay dead in the common, whose emotions or habits were at all affected by the newcomers. Many people had heard of the cylinder, of course, and talked about it in their leisure, but it certainly did not make the sensation an ultimatum to Germany would have done. In London that night, poor Henderson's telegram describing the gradual unscrewing of the shot was judged to be a canard, and this evening paper, after wiring for authentication from him and receiving no reply, the man was killed, decided not to print a special edition. Within the 5-mile circle, even the great majority of people were inert. I have already described the behaviour of the men and women to whom I spoke. All over the district, people were dining and supping. Working men were gardening after the labours of the day. Children were being put to bed. Young people were wandering through the lanes love-making. Students sat over their books. Maybe there was a murmur in the village streets, a novel and dominant topic in the public houses, and here and there a messenger or even an eyewitness of the later occurrences caused a whirl of excitement, a shouting and a running to and fro. But for the most part, the daily routine of working, eating, drinking, sleeping, went on as it had for almost countless years. As though no planet Mars existed in the sky. Even at Woking Station and Horsell and Chobham, that was the case. In Woking Junction, until a late hour, trains were stopping and going on, others were shunting on the sidings, passengers were alighting and waiting, and everything was proceeding in the most ordinary way. A boy from town, trenching on Smith's Monopoly, was selling papers with the afternoon news. The ringing and impact of trucks, the sharp whistle of the engines from the junction, mingled with his shouts of "Men from Mars!" Excited men came into the station with incredible tidings about 9 o'clock, and caused no more disturbance than drunkards might have done. People rattling Londonwards peered into the darkness outside the carriage windows, and saw only a rare, flickering, vanishing spark dance up from the direction of Horsell, a red glow and a thin veil of smoke driving across the stars, and thought that nothing more serious than a heath fire was happening. It was only around the edge of the common that any disturbance was perceptible. There were 6 villas burning on the Woking border. There were lights in all the houses on the common side of the 3 villages, and the people there kept awake till dawn. A curious crowd lingered restlessly, people coming and going, but the crowd remaining both on the Chobham and Horsell bridges. 1 or 2 adventurous souls, it was afterwards found, went into the darkness and crawled quite near the Martians, but they never returned, for now and again a light ray, like the beam of a warship's searchlight, swept the common, and the heat ray was ready to follow. Save for such, that big area of common was silent and desolate, and the charred bodies lay about on it all night under the stars, and all the next day. A noise of hammering from the pit was heard by many people. So you have the state of things on Friday night. In the centre, sticking into the skin of our old planet Earth like a poisoned dart, was this cylinder. But the poison was scarcely working yet. Around it was a patch of silent common, smouldering in places, and with a few dark, dimly lit objects lying in contorted attitudes here and there. Here and there was a burning burning bush or tree. Beyond was a fringe of excitement, and farther than that fringe the information had not crept as yet. In the rest of the world, the stream of life still flowed as it had flowed for immemorial years. The fever of war that would presently clog in vein and artery, deaden nerve, and destroy brain had still to develop. All night long the Martians were hammering and stirring, sleepless, indefatigable, at work upon the machines they were making ready, and ever and again a puff of greenish-white smoke whirled up into the starlit sky. About 11, a company of soldiers came through Horsell, and deployed along the edge of the common to form a cordon. Later, a second company marched through Chobham to deploy on the north side of the common. Several officers from the Inkerman barracks had been on the common earlier in the day, and one, Major Eden, was reported to be missing. The colonel of the regiment came to the Chobham Bridge and was busy questioning the crowd at midnight. The military authorities were certainly alive to the seriousness of the business. About 11, the next morning's papers were able to say a squadron of hussars, 2 Maxims, and about 400 men of the Cardigan Regiment started from Aldershot. A few seconds after midnight, the crowd in the Chertsey Road, Woking, saw a star fall from heaven into the pine woods to the northwest. It fell with a greenish light, causing a flash of light like summer lightning. This was the second cylinder. Venomane, thank you so much for that raid. I apologise I didn't answer it straight away. The timer hasn't come through, but I'm reading for a chapter and then I'm catching up with chat once the chapter is finished. But that is the end of it today. Yeah, sorry, there's more light from outside, so now my face is disappearing because there's a sort of greenish glow here. Let me see if I can offset this a little bit. Hang on. Oh, it's not working, so it's not plugged in. Never mind. You can tell it's me. My candles are still here, still burning. Thank you so much for that raid. What were you playing? Tales of Arise. Nice one. Eve, thank you for shouting out Venomane. Yeah, thanks so much, Venomane. This is very different to what I normally do. It was a little experiment to just read a book, War of the Worlds by h.g.wells, and yeah, just see what was going on with it. I'm not gonna. We're gonna end. I will see you guys tomorrow for the regularly scheduled chaos that is Minecraft Monday. half my head is missing. Goodness me. Whatever. I also have that book. Well, this exact edition, or do you just have the book? This is the oh, I think it says on the inside, the Great Writers Library. So it's not. It's almost a set, but they are by different authors and stuff. It's not just H.G. Wells stuff. Ooh, Sash, you'll arrive. I got my new monitor, so may actually join Minecraft. Do it. Do it. Come and finish your house, which I don't even. It's not even started yet. Also, hi, Chaos. Eve wants the chaos. Yeah, we are actually ending. So welcome, Sashwa. Welcome, Venomane. We are about to end. Rob Kean just went live. Did he now? Did he? Are you implying that I should raid him? I mean, I don't tend to raid partnered streamers. I mean, it's cool the ones that notice, but it's like I'm very much in favour of supporting smaller streamers as well. But I might tune into Kian. But I might do some Assassin's Creed. I don't know. I'll see what I want to do. If you're going to feel bad about not raiding, I'm not sure I feel bad about not raiding. Because there isn't really a category for this. If I went into the just chatting category, there could be loads of people, and they might not always be doing the readings. Oh, just the book, different edition. Okay, good then. No raiding. Yeah, okay. And this was only an experiment as well, and I'm not going to be doing it again for another 2 weeks. I wouldn't feel bad. Yeah, okay. I mean, I do raid for all of my other streams. Yeah. Okay. So that was it. We got to the end of chapter 8 of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Also what? Shout out, thank you, Eve. And you shout out Venomane, thank you. Can we highlight my message? Chapter 8. Yes, Sithis, we just finished chapter 8. Wait, what? Yeah, chapter 8, because the next one is chapter 9. Oh god, the candles are burning me. They're not even that close. Like, I'm holding my hands above the keyboard, but they still burn. Fire. Fire. There we go. Got to give Eva shout-outs as well. Yeah, that's it, everyone. I will see you tomorrow for Minecraft. The VOD for this stream will go up tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you. Why is my head disappearing? This is ridiculous. Look, I'm still there, honest. It's because my curtains are blue, and I'm guessing that it's just picking up on the chroma key a little bit. So maybe next time I'll try and get some sort of screen here or something if I can manage it. But yeah, we're not going to return to this for another 2 weeks, so that'll be Sunday the 10th of October. Because again, I don't want to do too much week to week, because then I'll just have no free time at all. I do, as much as I enjoy streaming, I do also enjoy having time to myself in between. It's like a ghost is reading the book. Oh, that would be good cosplay if I was to do A Christmas Carol. I could dress up as Jacob Marley or something. Every other week is perfectly fine. Practically perfect in every way. Like you guys. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope it was nice and chill. I hope you didn't fall asleep. Or if you did, it was nice to fall asleep. No, you. I told you, Eva, it doesn't count. It doesn't count if it's not the emote. So I can do it to you. Easily. But yeah. Muppets Christmas Carol cosplay Kermit. Hey guys. I'm Kermit the Frog. Have you seen Miss Piggy? Sorry, I'm a bit shy about coming on to the Robo stream. Oh dear. Thank you everyone. There's no raid. That's a pretty good voice. Thank you. That's the one time that I will do it. In before somebody redeems 5 minutes of Kermit. Oh, God. See you tomorrow, everyone. Thank you again, Venomane, for that raid. Thank you, Kara and Mute Gaming, for the host. Thank you, the stoned philosopher Leo, for the follow. GG's, everyone. Much love. Goodbye.